Aloha, everyone. I'm glad that you're here. We're going to be talking about eviction moratorium and rental relief. So I want to introduce to you our panelists. And we have 4 panelists today. And I'm Greggor Ilagan, your host. For those who don't know who I am, I'm the state representative for Puna. And that's the most handsome picture they could find of me on a suit. So it's on the slide at this moment. And if you want to contact me, reach out to my office number as well as my email. And I want to introduce you to Representative Troy Hashimoto. He is the Vice Chair of Housing, and he's going to tell us about Act 57 and the reason why it was passed. And the other 3 panelists are also going to share with us, let me just move this, more information about eviction moratoriums as well as rental assistance. And Scott is going to be talking about understanding of Act 57, the difference between the CDC moratorium and the state moratorium, and then trends with evictions. The next speaker, Julie Mitchell from Kuikahi Mediation Center, is going to be talking about understanding mediations, when to mediate, topics landlords and tenants should discuss. And our last speaker, Jeff, is going to be talking about understanding rental relief, how to qualify, and advice for those who don't qualify. So let's get this started and hand it off to Representative Troy Hashimoto.
Well, thank you, Rep. Ilagan, for hosting this town hall event to really share more information on what is going on with the eviction moratorium relaxing and also the availability of rental relief. And I think it's been a pleasure serving with Rep. Ilagan in the State House. I think he's a great addition. I think Puna is lucky to have him. The Big Island is lucky to have him serving. And I'm glad to call him a colleague of mine. So I think just to kind of give you a quick overview of where we're at this juncture, I think it's been, we started this whole journey of the governor announcing that he was going to end the state eviction moratorium, which was in place for over a year. In early August, he made that official. He announced that in late July, and that caused a number of triggers because we wrote this past session a bill to try and ease the burden off of landlords and tenants, and to come up with an organized way to get us back to a normal way of, tenant-landlord relationships. And we knew that this was coming. So back in December, before the session started, we began a working group of whole lot of different people, from landlord attorneys to the Legal Aid Society to the Mediation Center of the Pacific, the judiciary, former judges, the Realtors Association, Hawaii Appleseed Foundation, just to name a few, to come together and say, okay, we know at some point in time that the eviction moratorium will end, and we need to figure out some type of off-ramp. And we want to make sure that it's simple, as simple that it can be, and that it allows a cushion for those who may be in need. And so I think we really thought long and hard about it. We had many drawn out discussions, and the bill that we came up with was HB 1376. And at the heart of HB 1376 was trying to utilize the process that we currently have, which is that if you ever go through any type of eviction process, when you enroll in the judiciary and you go before a judge, they will order you to go to mediation to try and resolve a landlord and tenant case before going before the judge. And we said, okay, well, if that's already in place, we should streamline that process and move it before having to see a judge, because at the time we knew that a lot of there was a long line to see a judge because of COVID, because a lot of things were in limbo. So we wanted to get that main process out of the way because that just added time. And so we decided to move the mediation as a prerequisite to seeing a judge. And so we felt that mediation would be the heart of this program, and it continues to be the heart of the program, to ensure that landlords and tenants can talk to one another, and they can talk through a lot of the options and see what did they actually do to really make sure that they've exhausted all options before going before a judge, before going through the eviction process. Because the reality is the eviction process is not fun for anyone. If you get evicted, it's going to be on your record, and it's not good for a tenant. And we didn't want that to happen. So we believe mediation was a really good solution. And so we worked with the counties and also the local mediation centers to set that mediation program up. And it also builds in a buffer time for those who need to go through this mediation process, because we said, because there's some federal funds coming down, and we didn't really know this at the time. We knew there was going to be some federal funds coming down, but we didn't realize when we were working on this bill that there would be this much federal funds available for rental assistance. But we knew that with the federal funds coming down, there needed to be time to make sure that everyone could apply and qualify for that rental assistance. So we built in some time. And so for those that would be able to go through this process, the eviction process after mediation, did have to have at least 4+ months of rent or behind. And so it was a tiered process so there's a timeline for when you can go through that process. I think we're probably on the 3 months and behind at this point. We're probably likely going to 2 months very shortly of rent behind, and we won't really get to 1+ month of rent behind until January. So those who still have back rent, you still have time to really figure out what are your options out there. And that essentially what the bill was created to do as well, was to buy you time to take advantage of these federal programs, to figure out a plan of what's next. And I think that's really all we could really ask for at this juncture. But I think really I want to emphasize that a lot of federal funds are still available on the neighbor islands. It has never closed. So if you heard on the news, like KHON2 or KITV4, you hear about Oahu closing their rental relief applications. Well, that's not the case on the neighbor islands. The neighbor islands have been very fortunate that they've been able to handle the load. And so I want to make sure that everyone takes advantage of Jeff and his programs and the many other entities that are offering rental relief, because that is such an important component. If you have any back rent, or you're trying to figure that how to relieve that back rent, that is a program that you need to take advantage of and make sure that you qualify for, because it's once you apply, you kind of see that the qualification is fairly broad in terms of the levels of income that you make. So I think you should really take a look at, if you haven't done it. And it's been loosened just slightly in this newest tranche of federal funds, because there's been various iterations of the program. So I think we have great panelists tonight to take you through the nuances of HB 1376, which was passed and signed into law by the governor. I think the governor was very insistent that he wanted to get this program rolling, because he felt it was very long for the landlords to be waiting to get back to some type of normalcy. I think we wanted to protect tenants, but we also knew there was landlords who were really saying that they needed help. So we wanted to find that balance, and hopefully this has been an okay balance. And I think was looking at the numbers recently, and I think it seems like it's okay. I think there are some who are, having a hard time, but hopefully that's the minority, and we can find other resources if for some reason they can't make ends meet. But there's so many resources out there with all of the federal stimulus funds that if there's a will, there's likely a way, and we're going to try and help as many people as we can through the many programs that are out there. One thing that I do want to mention that is coming down the pipeline that is fairly new is that there is actually mortgage relief coming down. There was $50 million allocated to the state of Hawaii in the last stimulus package, and that is slowly making its way down. I know Hawaii County and Kauai County are going to be the pilot programs for Hawaii, and we really want to make sure that that money gets out to people who've had hardship, because I know that a lot of people have said, well, you're taking care of the renters, but what about those who have a mortgage and those who are the landlords. And I think this is the program that a lot of people have been waiting for. The unfortunate part is we've been slowed substantially by the US Treasury and their guidelines. And so it's been kind of a headache trying to figure out how to disseminate it to the right people, but just know that help is on the way. So Rep. Ilagan, thank you for hosting this. Thank you to Jeff, Julie, and Scott for being here as resources. And I really look forward to hearing all of your latest updates, because over time, this program has changed just slightly. You know, we've been at it since August, and now we're in October. And so I think hopefully we're just getting better and better at what we're doing, and things are getting a little bit more streamlined and quicker. So I think the bottom line is we want to help people, and the ultimate goal is to get back to some type of normalcy. So thanks, Rep. Ilagan.
Thank you, Rep. Hashimoto. So next is going to be Scott from Legal Aid.
Great. Just wanted to say thank you to Representatives Ilagan and Hashimoto for inviting me to be part of this great panel. So just wanted to share a few things with you folks. First and foremost, you know, before a tenant can be removed from their residence, a court order is generally required. It's also known as a writ of possession. This is something that has to be obtained from a court. And so without this document, you know, landlords, you know, unless the tenant has abandoned a property or surrendered the premises, electricity, water, other utilities, they need to be continued and remain on the premises. Similarly, you know, without any sort of good cause, the locks on the premises should not be changed, or the tenant should not otherwise be deprived of access to the property. And so just a few of the unfortunate consequences of an eviction. First of all, it's public record, so this can unfortunately affect folks when they're applying for another place to live. It can show up on any kind of search. You know, potentially if there is a lawsuit filed and the landlord does prevail, the tenant could be liable for attorney's fees and costs. There could also be an adverse impact on credit scores. And if the tenant is a recipient of a voucher, Section 8 voucher, an eviction can cause a potential loss of that benefit. Wanted to touch very briefly on the CDC moratorium. At one point, it did provide rental protection for folks facing eviction for not being able to pay their rent. It required the tenant to submit in a declaration to their landlord. But very recently, in August of this year, the US Supreme Court vacated this order. So it really provides no kind of protection to the tenant. But I do want to point out that recently HUD issued a rule that will be taking effect on November 8th, 2021. And this applies to folks that are living in HUD subsidized project-based housing. So this includes Section 8 project-based housing. And what this rule does is it actually requires 30 days notice before the tenant can be subject to any kind of summary possession or eviction lawsuit. So prior to the enactment of Act 57, this was the general process that an eviction lawsuit would follow. A landlord would issue a termination notice, and then if the arrears rent was not corrected, then the lawsuit would be filed. Would require the tenant and the landlord to come to court, and at that point, the tenant would respond to the complaint, admit or deny that the landlord was entitled to possession of the premises. If there was a denial entered by the tenant, there would usually be a pretrial hearing followed by a trial. And this is where each side, presents their witnesses and their arguments. And if the landlord prevails, then the writ of possession, the document I referred to earlier, that would get issued. And at some point, the tenant would move out, and then after the issue of possession is decided, then everyone comes back to court one more time, and the issue of damages or back rent or any kind of repair cost of the property, that those issues get decided at that point. Now, what Act 57 did was really affect the first two portions of this process. So the notice that is required now under Act 57, it requires 15 days before any kind of lawsuit can be filed, whereas before Act 57 became effective, it was only a 5-day notice. So a little bit more time now in place. And one of the reasons that that's in place is because the act was intended to hopefully have the parties come together and mediate. So during this 15-day period, what the tenant can do is contact the Mediation Center. And if the tenant does this, then what this does is it gives the tenant another 15 days. So a total of 30 days from when they receive this notice before the lawsuit can even be filed with the courts. This is just a brief summary of what Act 57, the changes that were affected. And one of the main changes, I think, is that the notice that is required of a landlord, it's actually quite a bit more expansive than what was required prior to Act 57. So there are 13 items that must be specifically included in the notice. And one of these things is the tenant's right to request a mediation, so they can contact Julie folks. And the one thing to keep in mind too, though, is that Act 57, it's going to expire on August 6, 2022, so about a year after it was enacted. And another feature of Act 57 is that it created a tiered system for when lawsuits could be filed. So, when the initial period was, if the tenant was behind 4 months of rent, those were the first lawsuits that could be filed. And then 30 days after that, it stepped down to if the tenant was behind for 3 months, then the next set of lawsuits could be filed, or the next set of evictions could be initiated through the issuing of those 15-day notices. So some of the things that are prohibited as a result of the moratorium that was in place that expired back in August is that there was a prohibition on the increase of rent from the period of March 4th, 2020 through August 6th, 2021. And for that same period of time, holdover rent couldn't be charged. So normally, if a tenant stays beyond the period of time when their lease expires, they would be liable to double or holdover rent. But because of that moratorium or the state of emergency, that type of rent was prohibited up until August 6th. And then if a property had certain types of financing, so if there was a federally backed loan, there was a prohibition on the charging of late fees or any penalties for the non-payment of rent. And this was only from March 27th to June 24th. And then just generally speaking, now that late fees, can be imposed, they are capped at 8% of the amount of rent that is due. And as far as attorney's fees, that amount is capped at 25% of the principal judgment, usually, the back rent plus any kind of damages or repair costs that had to be incurred by the landlord. And just very briefly, I kind of mentioned this earlier, right? Without the writ of possession or without the court order, lockouts or changing of the locks is prohibited, as well as utility shutoffs. So, interruptions of water, electricity, or gas. And so I think just finally what I'll say is that, if you're a tenant and you do receive one of these 15-day notices, you definitely want to respond and call the Mediation Center as soon as you can to try to get that, extended 30-day period for you. Another thing I think that's important is to make a budget so that when you come to mediation, you have a realistic picture of what kind of agreement, you're able to afford with the landlord. And then, if you need legal assistance, please contact us at Legal Aid. And of course, most importantly, attend your mediation. And if you have a court date, attend the court date, because if the tenant doesn't come to court, then you could get what's called a default judgment. If the landlord doesn't go to court, then the case, could be dismissed. So if there's any questions or folks need more information, that can actually be found on our website, www.legalaidhawaii.org. And there are information sheets that apply to tenants as well as landlords. And you can also apply for services there on our website. So.
Thank you so much, Scott. All right, Jeff, you're next. Oh, actually, Jeff, I apologize. It's actually Julie who's next. Go ahead, Julie.
Aloha, thank you so much, Representative Ilagan and Representative Hashimoto, for inviting me to be part of this panel. I'm great to present with Scott and Jeff. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the free landlord tenant eviction mediation program. This is a statewide program, and I'm going to be talking today about Kuikahi Mediation Center, which is located in East Hawaii. And this presentation was also created with our partners in West Hawaii in mind. So it's going to list both of our centers, because we serve together all of Hawaii County. So to date, Kuikahi Mediation Center, we have received 45 cases in the free landlord tenant eviction mediation program, which was created by Act 57. And we've probably received an equal number of inquiries that are about other landlord tenant issues beyond Act 57. And of the mediations that we've held today, we have an approximately 80% success rate in reaching a mediated agreement. I'm sorry, okay. I was trying to figure out how to advance the slide. So hold on a minute. It's different in this presentation. So we talked about how this new law states that tenants must be offered the opportunity to mediation when they are served with a 15-day notice for non-payment of rent. This program is not optional for the landlord. The landlord must offer it, and they must participate if they are serving a 15-day notice. The tenants, however, can choose to participate or not participate. Most tenants are choosing to participate, number one, because it's free. Number two, it's an option for them to avoid eviction and to avoid having to end up in court. So when the tenant receives the notice, it's important to contact the mediation center nearest to the tenant. So the location of the mediation center coincides with where the tenant lives in the rental unit. So for Kuikahi mediation, folks want to call 808-935-7844 extension 8. And landlords must, at the same time they are sending the 15-day notice to their tenant, they must immediately and at the same time send it to the mediation center so that we are receiving it in enough time to help the mediation get set up. So they're going to email us at landlordtenant@hawaiimediation.org. If the tenant doesn't contact the mediation center and schedule the mediation session within the 15 days allowed in the notice, it allows the landlord to move forward with the eviction. We have had a lot of success in reaching tenants because we are being proactive, trying to get a hold of them in any way we can, whether it's text or call or email. Though sometimes people don't always have email set up, or it bounces, or it goes into their spam, or they don't have their voicemail set up. So we encourage people to please reach back out to us as soon as possible, because we want to get your mediation scheduled in the time allowed. We also have 30 days from the date of the notice until the landlord can start filing for eviction. Now, during the 15 days or the 30 days, mediation can be scheduled, can be happening. And if we do it a little bit beyond the mediation session held a little bit beyond those dates, it's okay. It's just what happened concurrently with court filing. And if tenants and landlords do end up in court, the judge may send them back to mediation. It's up to each judge to have the discretion to do that if they think it's warranted. So once a mediation session is scheduled, we will work with the landlord and tenant to find a date and a time that can work for everyone. And then we send an email out letting people know when their mediation session will be. And we give them a link for Zoom with instructions on how to use Zoom, which I think most of us are familiar with, but not all of us. So you have to have some kind of a device, whether it's a computer, a tablet, smartphone, it's got to have a microphone, a camera. You've got to live somewhere where you have enough connectivity to get onto Zoom. And if that's not possible for you, we allow people to come into our center to use our equipment and to have us help with the Zoom technology. So if people do not feel like they're able to manage it on their own, or they just can't, I live in a location where I get one bar on my phone, maybe two. So Zoom is very challenging from there. We're here to help folks who need that. So how can people prepare for mediation? Well, number one, we're trying to connect them up with rental assistance. So Jeff is going to talk about that in a moment. We are encouraging all landlords and tenants to work with those programs to see if they can get the funding to cover any back rent or any future rent. We also are encouraging the tenants to contact Legal Aid Society of Hawaii, and that would be Scott, to see what their rights are. And also we do have on our website, Legal Aid has been great in providing two documents, the legal rights and responsibilities for tenants and legal rights and responsibilities for landlords. So if you go to our website, hawaiimediation.org, and our landlord tenant page, we're listing those because people are not always familiar with what they need to be doing to stay within the rules. Also thinking about what possible outcomes do you want from mediation? What's reasonable to expect your landlord to do or your tenant to do? What are you thinking of in terms of what kind of flexibility you have in negotiations? We also encourage people to talk with a financial counselor, know what your options are. And this can be for the landlords as well, because as you just heard, there's some funding, mortgage relief funding coming out. You want to see what it is that your budget can afford, whether you're the landlord or the tenant. And then also thinking about if you're the tenant, if you can't stay in this home, where are you going to go? Do you have any friends or families? Are you able to find another rental unit that you can afford? So trying to have this mindset where people are thinking and considering the options really helps in mediation, because mediation is all about talking and listening, exploring options, and trying to come up with your own best solution. So here's how the mediation is going to work. We have a confidentiality agreement that we email to the tenant and the landlord. They'll sign it electronically prior to the mediation. Mediation is a private process, and the communications that happen in mediation cannot be shared at later legal proceedings. So we want people to feel secure in sharing honestly with the mediator what's going on for them. We also can provide an interpreter if English is not somebody's first language and they need assistance. We can do that for both the intake and for the actual mediation. And for the session itself, we usually schedule for 1.5 hours, though it can be shorter than that, or it can be longer than that, because mediations are as individual as the people who come to them. So we have to allow enough time for us to get through all the issues. And then the way that mediations are normally held is that we start out all together in a group Zoom, and the mediator goes over what mediation is and what the process is, and a few ground rules, and invites the landlord and tenant to briefly share what their perspective is on the situation. And then the mediator will meet privately with the landlord and the tenant a few times, and then at the end come back together and see where we are, if we're going to be writing up an agreement and what steps are needed. And we normally do that all together. And if there's some reason that someone feels unsafe or not sure about being in the same Zoom room with the other person, we can talk about that, and if needed, we can have the mediation happen completely in separate sessions. So what is the mediator going to do? Well, the mediator is going to do some deep listening, as well as ask a lot of questions. So, hey, have you folks applied for rental assistance? Yes, no, why or why not? What happened? What is your financial situation, tenant? Are you still on unemployment? Have you gotten a job? What does your finances look like going forward? Do you have any anticipated changes happening? And what are your plans? Do you want to stay in this unit? Do you want to move somewhere else? Let us know what it is that you prefer, if you could wave a magic wand and get all your wishes come true. We want to know what your vision is, and then we also want to know what you're willing to do if you can't achieve your vision. So the mediator's job is to be an impartial third party who is helping everybody in the mediation to negotiate an agreement that everybody feels good about. So the idea is to stay flexible so that that kind of give and take is possible to reach something that everybody feels good about and that can hopefully resolve the matter. So the mediator also asks a lot of questions of the landlord. You know, what is the most important thing to you? Do you want to cover the back rent? Do you want to have the tenant move out and risk never recouping the back rent? What was your relationship like with your tenant? Did they pay on time? Did you consider them a good tenant? Are they worth keeping if you could recoup some or all of the back rent? Would you even consider renewing a lease with them? And would you consider looking at rent reduction? Would you consider waiving some or all of the back rent if the tenant agreed to move out as soon as possible? So mediations are as varied as the people who are in the mediations, and they include a lot of different terms. They are very creative. I've never seen two mediation agreements that are exactly alike. So these are a few options of what a mediation agreement might include. So the landlord and tenant agree to work together to apply for rental assistance. It can outline contingencies. So if rental assistance is received, then we're going to do X, Y, and Z. If it's not received, we're going to do A, B, and C, such as perhaps a payment plan will be needed to cover some or all of the back rent owed. Perhaps the landlord and tenant agree that moving out would be the best, and then they'd lay out a timeline, how that would happen, what would happen with the security deposit, maybe some or all of the back rent could be owed if the landlord could get the property back to rent it out to someone else who can pay. So it just depends what people's needs are, how they're willing to move forward. And so the whole idea behind this Act 57 mediation program is trying to keep the landlord and the tenant out of court and avoid the eviction process. What are some of the benefits of this mediation program? Well, number one, it's free, so it does not cost anything. Mediation can help preserve or improve relationships between landlords and tenants. I know it's been a very stressful time for the past year and a half, and there was a lot of fear about communicating and saying the wrong thing, both on the landlord and a tenant side. And sometimes silence actually creates conflict because you just don't know what's going on with the other person. So just having the ability to talk together can be very healing. Mediation is not like going to court. Okay, so in court, the judge decides. In mediation, the participants decide. In court, everything's public and it's on the record, and in mediation, it's private and confidential. And in court, the judge has to rule very narrowly based on the law, and in mediation, we can do very creative solutions that are really not based on a specific statute. Like you might decide someone's going to do some work trade in place of back rent, or we can outline a payment plan, whereas in court, the court can issue a judgment, but they can't figure out how the payments are going to be made. Mediators are impartial. They're there to help people and make everyone feel comfortable and safe. We hope that through this program, people can avoid court, they can avoid eviction. And so in the county of Hawaii, we're lucky to have 2 mediation centers. And again, the landlord and the tenant are going to be contacting the mediation center where the rental unit is located. So for the free landlord tenant eviction mediation program in East Hawaii, you're going to contact Kuikahi Mediation Center, 935-7844 extension 8. And our email is landlordtenant@hawaiimediation.org. On our website, we have lots of resources to help both landlords and tenants understand this program. And we invite you to check it out at hawaiimediation.org/landlord tenant. Thank you so much. I appreciate you listening.
Thank you, Julie. All right, save the best for last. Go ahead, Jeff.
Mahalo, Representative. It's good to see everybody. Representative Hashimoto, Julie, Scott. It's an honor to always present alongside you folks on such important things. And so presenting to you folks tonight really to tell you exactly what this landing page says on our website, that we've got grants available for rent, utilities, rental deposit, even temporary motel stays for low-income renters on Hawaii Island. Now that's folks who've been directly impacted by COVID or indirectly. So in our estimation, our assessment of the language from the federal government, that means anybody that's a low-income renter on Hawaii Island can benefit. So when you come to our website, hawaiicountyerap.org, this is the landing page. If you need additional assistance in language, we're providing assistance through our nonprofit partners in the languages you see listed here. You can click on one of these and you will get connected with phone number, email, and a name of an individual at one of our organizations who can take you through the process in this language. The goal of the program really right now is to get more than $11 million in grants out the door and into our communities. Our housing market is the underpinning of our local economy. So if we don't provide the type of assistance that's needed to shore up the past due rent, it'll mean that in the future we'll have a harder time getting jobs, we'll have a harder time building affordable housing, starting small businesses. And so again, we're having this money available not only for past due rent, but know that we pay rent in advance. So if you are struggling to pay rent, but you're on time right now, we can pay as much as 3 months in advance. And again, this is for directly or indirectly impacted through June 30 of 2022. So I want to say again, this is through June 30, 2022. A little bit of an overview. The County of Hawaii has partnered with 7 nonprofits. We're one of them at Hawaii Community Lending, and we're working with 6 others on island. We're taking applications, processing payments, getting approvals. So that means you have 6 back offices actually cutting checks, wiring funds right there, right on Hawaii Island. You don't have to wait for a check to come from Honolulu. The grants themselves, we can pay as far back as March 2020, and again, through June 2022, but not to exceed 15 months of total assistance at this time. With the support of Mayor Roth, we have added housing stability services to the program so that if families are facing eviction, if they don't qualify for assistance, we have a host of resources and services available to help provide a safety net for renters so you don't have to resort or you don't have to fall victim to houselessness. Again, the program will stay open through June 30 of 2022. So probably the biggest question that folks ask is, who can apply? And so what I'll tell you is that if you are a low-income renter residing on Hawaii Island, you should apply. Again, if you're struggling just to make rent, you're on time, we can still pay 3 months in advance. If you have past due rent, we can help you there. And don't forget the utilities. We can help in any kind of past due utilities, again, maximum 15 months of assistance. Households have to complete 1 application with 1 nonprofit. So we have 6 nonprofits taking applications. So I tell you, you don't go faster if you apply to all 6 because we share a database, right? And so if you apply to that first one, that's going to be the one that'll take your application. They'll move you through the process. The other 5 will deny you for having a duplicate application. So save yourself some time, pick one of the nonprofits and move forward. So applicants must be, as I said, at or below 80% area median income and have proof of a hardship. So it could be due to COVID, due to unemployment, but it could be other financial hardships. Maybe you're having to provide additional childcare for your own children because you don't have that as a resource right now. We can provide an attestation form, a form that basically lays out, and you get to tell us what is that financial hardship that you're facing so we can move forward with the process. The payments that we pay out go directly to the landlord, the property manager, or the utility company. Something to note, so this is actually a new bullet point, as we've seen this program evolve over time. So recipients of temporary hotel and motel stays must first enroll with our housing navigator programs at Hope Services or Neighborhood Place of Puna. And I'll provide some more information down the line as we can. So what are the housing stability services that are available? So just by applying to the program, we'll be assessing you to see what other services are out there. So our housing navigators are at Hope Services and Neighborhood Place of Puna. These folks work with you and your family to find housing in whatever community they can. So they'll work alongside you. Those same housing navigators, if there's no housing stock available, have funds to pay for temporary hotel and motel stays. All right, so we're using this as a strategy to make sure that folks don't go houseless, and we have participating motels and hotels as well as vacation rentals who are willing to do this. We have a partnership with Scott and Rachel over at Legal Aid Society of Hawaii, providing free legal advice for rental evictions, and they will be doing some workshops, some virtual workshops as time goes on. We also have a partnership right now with mediation centers. And so we do have information on the site that folks can sign up and go to Julie, Kuikahi Mediation Center, or West Hawaii Mediation Center to find that agreement, right? Come together and make sure it works for both the tenant and the landlord. And last, as folks have been alluding to, financial counseling. Hawaii County is going to be coming out with an announcement from the mayor's office tomorrow, launching our financial empowerment centers. These are centers that are run by Hawaiian Community Assets and Hawaii First Federal Credit Union. You can apply and enroll with these centers, and what you'll get paired with is a financial advisor who will work with you in your ohana, not just to build a budget, not just to look at your credit, but also to find affordable loans and other opportunities that may be out there that can assist at this time. You can find all of this information again on our website at hawaiicountyerap.org. And when you go to that website, you'll see 3 icons at the top once you get past the landing page. And the one you can click on first is Documents Checklist. So this is the checklist of all the items that our nonprofit partners are going to need to complete an application. You'll see at the top, these are the maximum annual income thresholds for your household, depending on the number of persons in that household. I will note for you on the income documents, we'll need those for all adult household members that are earning income. And I recommend if you can provide that 2020 federal tax return, that is the only financial document that you will need to provide. If not, you'll need to provide all the other items that are listed there on this list. Last I would note is proof of hardship. So we can take an unemployment or PUA approval letter. If you don't have that, the nonprofit has a written attestation form where you can actually tell us what that financial hardship is, and you attest under potential penalty and perjury of the law that this is in fact true and an accurate hardship. That will move you through potentially to get approved. The second thing you'll click, and you can click, is our where to apply. These are the 6 nonprofit partners who are taking applications. They're processing, reviewing, and making payments. These folks have been in the trenches, I can't say enough, since August of 2020. And they've been working hard for community at nonprofit salaries, working late nights to make sure that dollars get out the door. So they're here to work with you folks, whether you go to them in person at any of those physical addresses, which you can. If you don't have access to a computer or to internet, you can call any of those phone numbers and you can actually complete an application over the phone. But if you do have access to a computer and online, we recommend that you apply by clicking on the website links that are there. That's the fastest way to do it. But if you have any questions, you can also email any of those folks and they can assist you. Just wanted to give you folks a sense. So on this website, we also have a data dashboard. So if you want to be checking back every week, see how things are going, see how it's progressing, this is the place to go. So every Wednesday, it does get updated. We're close to $7 million out the door to a little over 1,000 approved applications. We have quite a few going through the process and pending approval, but those that have been disapproved, we collect data to figure out why is that and what's happening. So what we're seeing in terms of why folks are being denied for assistance is that top one, duplicate application. Again, all you have to do is pick one of those 6 nonprofit partners and apply. No sense in applying to the others. That's just going to take up a bunch of your time, and you will get a denial letter from any of the nonprofits that receive it after the first one. So pick one nonprofit and apply. The second is either missing required documents or being non-responsive on follow-ups. So what we ask is that once you start this process, expect a phone number from a different number you're not used to, right? Expect an email from somebody you're not familiar with because they may be requesting additional documents from you. At the same time, we can't have a complete application until all those documents are collected. And this is not our rules. These are the rules by the federal government, the overlays of the state and the county. So we need to make sure we get this right so that we're in compliance with the law. As you can see, there are other disapproval reasons, but far fewer. And we're seeing quite a few of our folks who are coming through our services needing financial counseling. So again, going to those financial empowerment centers and getting connected with an advisor. We have some details on applications received, and I'm just going to point out a couple things here. The first is that you see in this, this blue donut shape that we're seeing right now, about 55% of the folks who are applying are currently unemployed still. That means their federal unemployment assistance that was coming is no longer there, right? And so this gives you a sense of where the economy's at. Coming back to this and taking a look, we haven't seen the recent return to work percentage increase much, but it has gone from 15% to 18% since about the beginning of August. So that's telling us maybe there's some movement in the economy. Right. The other thing I would point out is that this COVID situation has impacted certain folks economically more so than others. And I'll point out the head of household. Female head of households are being impacted at far higher rates economically by COVID than male head of households. And we're seeing that in our applications. At the same time, Native populations are being disproportionately impacted. So you can see a significant number of Native Hawaiians who have been applying to the program. Last you'll see on this dashboard is really who are we approving? And I want to point you to the average household income of folks who are applying. Folks are not making much. This is about $2,000 a month, right? And trying to make ends meet. So these grants are amazing for folks. They go far, but also for those folks who, if you're above this household income, know that that is okay, and that if you are struggling to pay rent and you're still current, you should come to us and we'll pay 3 months in advance. Let's give you that stability, right? The average grant is about $3,400, and I think we should be proud that over 3,100 residents on Hawaii Island have benefited from this program so far. We continue to push. Every week we're seeing about 500 more residents, new residents being assisted through this program, and we want to keep pushing this. So if you have family, friends, neighbors, coworkers, you're an employer, let everybody know. This program is out there, and Rep. Ilagan mentioned it. It has never closed here on Hawaii County. It won't close here. We've got the partners ready to take applications at any time. So please go to Hawaii County ERAP and apply. And I'll just point again, this is the website. Please look us up. And I just want to mahalo again, representatives, Julie, Scott, for sharing this space with us. And of course, all of our partners here with their logos who have made this possible. Mahalo.
Thank you so much, Jeff, as well as all the panelists. Thank you so much for your work for keeping families in their homes. I also want to give a big mahalo to Naleo for broadcasting this to Channel 54. So I want to say goodbye, everybody. Thank you so much for your work, and you guys take care. Aloha.